What if everything you've believed about your spiritual life until now is incomplete? What if the true reason behind so many struggles, oppressions, repetitions of negative cycles, and spiritual blockages affecting Black people is much deeper and older than you imagine? What if there are invisible forces that have been silently operating for centuries to prevent Black people from discovering who they truly are in the spiritual world? This question may sound harsh, even controversial, but it's urgent. Because there's a recurring pattern: spiritual suffering, exclusion, internal battles, broken homes, emotional, mental, and even physical misery. These aren't just coincidences. There's a silent war happening, and it's not just social or historical, it's spiritual. And the worst part is that most people don't see it. Many Black people are living with invisible chains on their souls, facing pains they can't name, constantly feeling attacked, even when they do everything to live correctly. Have you ever noticed how certain problems seem to haunt Black families for generations? Curses that repeat themselves, dreams that never come true, children who are lost, illnesses that appear without explanation, relationships that always end the same way. Why is this? Why such intensity in spiritual attacks? There is something wrong on the spiritual plane that needs to be revealed, and the silence on this subject is costing too much. This is a conversation that almost no one dares to have. But it needs to be had, because as long as this mystery remains unexposed, thousands of people will continue to be trapped without knowing the reason for so much spiritual burden. And the saddest thing is that for many, this seems normal, as if it were part of destiny, of life. But the truth is that there is a deep, strategic spiritual origin to so many attacks against Black people. And understanding this is the first step to breaking free from everything that has been designed to limit their spiritual lives. If you are Black, or know someone who is, this message is urgent. It's not about religion, it's about liberation. It's about spiritual identity. It's about restoring what has been taken away over the centuries. And however difficult it may be to face, the system we live in was built to erase this truth. But today, we will open this wound, not to bleed, but to heal. Because there is power in truth, and it liberates. In this video, we'll delve deep into 10 spiritual revelations you've never been told. We'll talk about the true spiritual origins of Black people, distorted roots, generational curses, hidden attacks operating in the shadows, the invisible war being waged, the silence of the churches, the role of ancestors, the lost codes of the Bible, forgotten prophecies, and above all, the restoration that has already begun. You will understand that these spiritual attacks are not random. They have an origin, a purpose, and a solution, but only those who have the courage to listen to the end will be able to break the cycle. So, stay with me until the end, because what you will hear here can change the way you see your story, your spirituality, and your mission in the world. And if you feel this speaks to you, share it, because this truth needs to reach every heart that carries within it the mark and strength of Black people. And before we continue with the revelations that will open your eyes to this hidden spiritual reality, I want to ask you something very important. Leave a comment below about what you've been feeling so far. This isn't just a video, it's a collective awakening. And when you comment, you position yourself spiritually. You declare that you are ready to break the silence and break free from the cycles that try to imprison you. Your voice matters. Every comment here strengthens this message, helps this content reach more people who, like you, urgently need to know the truth. So right here, I am waking up spiritually, or share what has touched your heart the most so far. If this topic resonates with you, don't leave without giving it a like. This shows YouTube that this content is relevant and helps spread this light to thousands of other lives. And of course, if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because this is just the beginning. There are even deeper revelations that we'll be sharing in future videos, and you won't want to miss them. Have you ever wondered why Africa, throughout history, has been such a target of invasions, exploitation, and cultural and spiritual erasure? Why has there been so much effort, for so many centuries, to silence the true history of Black people? There is something many don't understand. The African continent is not only the cradle of humanity, it is also one of the deepest and oldest spiritual roots in the history of creation. And this truth, when forgotten, deprives Black people of a vital part of their spiritual identity. In the scriptures, The African continent appears from the very first chapters, not as a supporting character, but as a protagonist. Let's start with Cush. In Genesis 10:6, we read that Cush is the son of Ham, grandson of Noah and father of Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. Cush is undoubtedly a direct reference to African regions, more precisely to Ethiopia. The word Cush in the Bible is frequently translated as Ethiopia in many versions. This means that the black-skinned people were already present soon after the flood, at the beginning of the reorganization of the post-ark world. Now think about this. If these peoples are mentioned from the beginning, if Ethiopia is cited dozens of times throughout the Bible, why do so few people talk about their role in the construction of faith and spirituality? Why is there so much talk about Rome, Greece, Israel, but so little about Ethiopia, Egypt, Cush? Because understanding the true spiritual role of these peoples dismantles many structures that were built to keep black people disconnected from their sacred heritage. And when you disconnect someone from their spiritual origin, you weaken them, because they no longer know where they came from. And consequently, they also don't know where they should go. Egypt, another African territory, is widely mentioned in the scriptures, not only as a setting for conflicts and liberations, but also as a center of knowledge, wisdom, and power. Moses, for example, was educated within Pharaoh's household. The wisdom of Egypt was respected, feared, and even sought by other nations. The Bible shows that Abraham went to Egypt, Joseph was governor in Egypt, and Jesus himself, as a child, was taken to Egypt to protect himself from Herod's persecution. In other words, even the Son of God, by divine order, found refuge on African soil. Can you grasp the depth of this? It's no coincidence. There is a spiritual connection between black people and the most important movements in sacred history. But this connection has been erased, distorted, made secondary. Why? Because knowing this empowers, knowing this awakens, knowing this heals. And that's exactly what the spiritual enemy doesn't want you to know. Ethiopia, for example, was a respected nation. In Acts 8, the Holy Spirit sends Philip to speak with an Ethiopian eunuch, an important man in the court of Queen Candace. This eunuch was reading Isaiah, seeking the truth, and in that encounter, he is baptized and becomes one of the first to take the gospel to Africa. This shows that Africans were not only present in biblical narratives, they were seekers of truth, open to divine revelation, and used by God to spread the faith. These passages are not symbolic, they are real. They cry out that there is a spiritual bond between God and black people, a bond that has been stained with blood, erased by systems of domination, and silenced. But the time is coming to reclaim this heritage, because you need to understand, the spiritual oppression that many black people face today did not begin with them. It comes from generations. It comes from a forced rupture between identity and spirituality. For centuries, African peoples cultivated a profound spirituality connected to nature, spirit, and ancestral wisdom. There was reverence for the sacred and spiritual codes of conduct that went far beyond what is seen on the surface. When these traditions were demonized and replaced by structures that imposed spiritual submission, identity was torn apart. Many were taught that being black was synonymous with sin, inferiority, and separation from God. But this is a lie. A theological, historical, and spiritual lie, because the presence of black people on the spiritual plane has always been strong, and that is why the attacks are also so intense. There is an ancestral wisdom dormant within many, something that vibrates within the soul, but which has been stifled by shame, slavery, and colonization. And all of this was spiritual. It wasn't just physical. Every attempt to strip the spiritual strength from black people has an invisible root, operating in the shadows, to keep them distant from the truth. But when you know your roots, when you understand that the blood that runs in your veins carries the history of kings, prophets, sages, and spiritual warriors, something begins to awaken. The problem is that most churches don't talk about this. Most black people live in adapted faith, shaped by structures that don't acknowledge their spiritual origins. And this causes many to feel disconnected from God. How many times have you heard someone say, "I pray, but I don't feel anything"? How many times have you wondered why so many attacks are repeated, why the oppression seems endless, why there is so much silence within a soul that cries out for liberation? Perhaps it's because you're trying to live a spirituality that doesn't acknowledge your history. You're trying to seek God through a lens that was never meant for you. But when you begin to see that your identity is spiritual, that your color, your history, your ancestry are not obstacles, but rather part of the plan. You begin to experience a living faith, a faith that heals, a faith that liberates. This reconnection begins with knowledge. It begins with recognizing the role of African peoples in the scriptures, with ceasing to see oneself as someone apart from biblical history, and beginning to recognize oneself as a central part of God's movement. It begins with looking at one's roots with respect, not shame. It begins with reclaiming what was stolen, the spiritual strength of Black people. And at this moment, I want to extend a sincere invitation to you. Comment below, "My roots are spiritual," if this resonates with you. And if any part of your spiritual history seems dormant, write, "I am ready to reconnect." Because this space here is more than just a video. It's a territory of healing, revelation, and restoration. I want to read your comment and know how this truth is touching you. Have you ever felt as if something inside you has been ripped away, but you can't explain it? As if there's an ancestral void, a longing for something you never experienced, but feel belongs to you? This feeling is not accidental. It's a reflection of a spiritual reality that has been violently distorted over the centuries. Black people have experienced one of the greatest inversions of purpose in human history. And this inversion wasn't just social, political, or economic. It was, and still is, spiritual. It all began when the invaders not only enslaved bodies, but also enslaved minds, erased names, changed languages, prohibited rituals, and burned memories. What was once sacred became sin. What was once ancestral wisdom came to be called witchcraft. What was once honor was labeled shame. And this deliberate shift in meaning planted a lie so profound that it still echoes in the souls of millions of Black people around the world today. When you uproot a people from their land, you are not merely removing them from the physical territory. You disconnect them from the spiritual codes that govern that land, sever their communication with the spirits of their ancestors, and distance them from the symbols, stories, and practices that sustain their connection to the divine. This is a spiritual rupture, and that is exactly what happened to the Africans who were kidnapped and taken to the West. But what many do not understand is that this kidnapping was not only of people, it was also of purposes. The plan was clear. If you destroy a people's identity, you destroy their strength, because when a person doesn't know who they are, they become vulnerable, and the spiritual enemy knows this. That's why the attack was directed precisely at the root of Black spiritual identity, by making Black people believe that their history begins in slavery, that their color is a curse, that their culture is pagan, that their faith is inferior. He created an entire generation of souls who fight against their own essence. This is a diabolical distortion, and it needs to be unmasked. Slavery was not merely a human injustice. It was a spiritual strategy to silence voices that carried profound revelations. Black people have always had an intense connection with the invisible, with the mysteries of the soul, with the spiritual world. But this connection was systematically discredited. It was ridiculed. It was demonized. Colonization took not only land and resources, it also took the spiritual keys that the people used to connect with God, with nature, with the cycles of life. Imagine growing up believing that everything your ancestors practiced was wrong. Imagine being taught that your own history is a curse, that your culture is dirty, that your spirituality is inferior. This creates an internal division, a self-hatred disguised as faith. Millions of Black people around the world grew up praying to a God presented to them in the image of an oppressor, with messages filtered through structures that did not recognize them as part of the divine plan. And this generates a sick faith, a faith that does not heal, that does not liberate, that does not reconnect. But this distortion didn't arise from nothing. It was carefully orchestrated to keep Black people in a state of spiritual servitude. The system taught Black people to distance themselves from their origins. It was no accident that the language was forbidden, the names were changed, the rites were burned, the symbols were prohibited. Everything that referred to the ancestral power of Black people was eliminated, because they knew that true freedom begins in the spirit. They knew that a people who know their spiritual origin do not bow down, do not submit, do not accept living below their mission. And look, we're not talking about returning to practices that have been corrupted or mystified over time. We're talking about reconnecting with the spiritual truth that has been hidden, with the sacred heritage that has been inverted. Some people think that black people are attacked spiritually because they are weaker, but it's precisely the opposite. The spiritual attacks are so constant and repeated because there is immense potential that needs to be prevented from flourishing. The attacks are a sign of what you carry within yourself. This inversion of purpose is not just individual. It is collective. It is present in religious systems that ignore the black presence in the Bible. It is in history books that begin the black narrative with slavery. It is in films, songs, soap operas, and sermons that reinforce the image of black people as the other, as those who need to be corrected, as those who need to adapt. But this is a lie. Black people are a central part of God's spiritual plan, and when you understand this, the chains begin to fall. That's why so many black people feel lost, disconnected, always fighting against forces they can't see. Because there is indeed a spiritual battle, and it didn't start now. It comes from a long time ago. It comes from a systematic attempt to erase what is most precious: their spiritual mission, their connection with God, their ability to access the invisible, to interpret signs, to walk between heaven and earth with ancestral wisdom. Many of the pains you carry are not your own. They are echoes of a silenced history, of an identity pushed into oblivion. But now is the time to retrace your steps, not with anger, but with awareness, not with revolt, but with revelation. The revelation that you are not a product of chance. You are a descendant of kings, of priests, of spiritual warriors. You carry in your bones the memory of a connection that needs to be restored. And this won't be easy, because everything around you will try to convince you that this is an exaggeration, that it doesn't matter, that spirituality is something generic, colorless, without history. But spirituality also has roots. It also has an origin. And when you ignore that origin, you cut off the flow. And that's what so many are experiencing: a blocked flow, a shallow faith, a fragmented spiritual life. But all of this can change when the truth comes to light. Therefore, if you are listening to this and feel something inside you stirring, don't ignore it. Perhaps this is the beginning of your reconnection. And if this word is echoing within your spirit, write in the comments, "I am returning to my spiritual origin." Or, if you prefer, share in your own words how this reversal of purpose has impacted your journey so far. I want to know what is awakening within you. Let's continue this journey together. And when we talk about distorted spiritual identity, we cannot ignore the invisible weight that accompanies so many black families across generations. A weight that is often difficult to explain in words, but which manifests itself in a real way in life, in the body, in the mind, and especially in the soul. A repetitive pattern of pain, failure, illness, emotional prisons, inexplicable losses, relationships that never prosper, absent parents, wounded children, destroyed homes, addictions that perpetuate themselves. Have you ever stopped to notice how certain pains seem to repeat themselves in the same families, generation after generation? This is not a coincidence. There is a spiritual reality behind it, and it needs to be exposed. Because as long as we continue to treat these pains as normal life problems, we will continue to fuel cycles that should never have begun. In fact, these cycles have a name: generational curses. And many of them began when black people were disconnected from their spiritual roots, when their beliefs were dismissed, their names erased, and their spiritual authority denied. The Bible doesn't hide this truth. In Exodus 25, it is written, "For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me." What does this mean in practice? That there are sins, traumas, pacts, wrong decisions, abuses, unresolved pains that become open spiritual wounds within the family lineage. These wounds are passed down from father to son, from mother to daughter, without being treated. And when the origin of a pain is unknown, it is carried as if it were part of life. Black people, in particular, carry these spiritual marks as invisible inheritances. Abandonment, for example, is a pattern that repeats itself in thousands of black families. Grandparents who were abandoned, parents who grew up without role models, children who repeat the same pattern. It's as if there's a force working to destabilize the black home from its very foundation. And yes, this is spiritual. Because the home is the first environment where identity is shaped. And if the home is destroyed, identity also suffers cracks. And when identity is wounded, Spiritual purpose is lost along the way. Another common pattern is that of scarcity, the constant struggle to have the bare minimum, the feeling that it's never enough, that something is always missing. Entire families marked by lack, not just of money, but of recognition, opportunity, peace, emotional structure. And this is also a form of spiritual attack, because constant scarcity depletes faith, wears down the mind, and sickens the body. When a person spends their whole life struggling to survive, they can hardly stop and ask, "What is my spiritual calling?" And that's where addictions come in. How many stories do we know of black men destroyed by alcohol, drugs, and violence, and of black women who carry the weight of entire families alone, silently falling ill? This didn't start now. This isn't just behavior. This is a reflection of spiritual wounds that have never been treated, of pains that haven't been named, of pacts that were made and are still collecting their due. Because yes, there are spiritual curses that take hold when someone strays from principles, when entire generations walk far from spiritual truth. And here we are not blaming the ancestors. On the contrary, many of them were victims of a cruel system that forced them to deny their faith, their culture, their rights, their connection to the sacred. Many were forced to accept a new faith under the whip, were baptized with names that were not their own, forced to swear allegiance to a deity imposed upon them, under threat of death. And all of this generated profound spiritual traumas, because imposed faith is not faith. It is control. It is domination. It is spiritual silencing. These traumas, when left unhealed, become the roots of a curse, and these roots bear fruit of pain, confusion, and existential emptiness. And you may not even understand where this emptiness comes from, but it's there, screaming in your soul, because deep down, it knows that something has been broken, that an alliance has been shattered, that a connection with the sacred has been replaced by a system of spiritual oppression. And how do these attacks manifest themselves today? In silent but constant ways. Black people who feel burdened when trying to pray, who begin a spiritual journey with strength, but soon stray, who feel an invisible barrier when trying to draw closer to God, who dream of strange things, wake up tired, feel presences, hear voices, have unexplained emotional crises, fall ill without a proven medical cause. These are signs of ongoing spiritual battles, but often they are ignored or treated with triviality. Have you ever seen a family where several members share the same tragic fate? Men who die young, women who suffer from abusive relationships, children who disappear emotionally, hereditary diseases that make no sense. This could be the consequence of an unbroken curse, something that began long ago, but continues to live on in the spiritual world. And it will only be stopped when someone has the courage to face the truth, stand up and say, "Enough, this stops with me." Perhaps you are that person. Perhaps you are here watching this video because you were called to be the endpoint of a story of pain and the starting point of a new spiritual lineage. But this begins with knowledge, with revelation, with decision. Nothing changes until something is confronted, until the truth is brought to light. Because curses don't disappear with human effort. They are broken with spiritual authority. And you only exercise authority when you know your position, your identity, your origin, your purpose. Have you ever wondered why you feel such a heavy burden without having done anything to deserve it? Why you feel deep sadness for no reason? Why you're afraid to prosper? Why, whenever something is about to go right, something happens and everything falls apart? Perhaps you are carrying a burden that is not yours, an ancient yoke, an invisible chain, but one that can be broken, and it begins to unravel when the light of truth illuminates what was hidden. This light is beginning to shine now. And if you're feeling it inside, if something in your spirit is reacting, don't ignore it. Comment below, "I break with the curses of my lineage," or write in your own words how these spiritual patterns have manifested in your history, in your family, in your daily life. Your comments are not just answers. They are spiritual declarations. They pave the way for the next step. Let's go together, because there are still deeper revelations ahead. And when we understand that there are curses passed down from generation to generation, traumas that accumulate in the collective soul of a people, we begin to see that this is not just a set of random or unfortunate situations. There is something much deeper, older, and more strategic happening behind the scenes of the existence of Black people. A silent, invisible, but absolutely real war that directly targets those who carry a powerful spiritual calling. And when we talk about spiritual callings, we need to talk about promise, about destiny, about a people chosen to fulfill something grand on the spiritual plane, but who have been attacked in every way precisely because of that. The Bible does not leave us ignorant of this reality. In Ephesians 6:12, it is written, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." This means that many of the battles we face in the physical world, rejection, racism, exclusion, violence, poverty, persecution, are reflections of a much more complex war that takes place on the spiritual plane. And Black people are at the center of this battlefield, not because they are weak, not because they are lost, but because they carry a potential that threatens the darkness. Have you ever noticed that there is an invisible force operating to prevent Black people from discovering their true spiritual identity? From birth, they are already marked. From a young age, they are conditioned to doubt themselves, to see themselves as lesser, to adapt in order to survive. It's not a coincidence. It's a strategy, a spiritual strategy to block gifts, to kill purposes, to divert destinies. Because when an entire people begins to rise up with spiritual awareness, with authority, with an understanding of who they are, the kingdom of darkness trembles, because it knows that there are children of the promise there. And who are the children of the promise? They are those who, even when oppressed, were never defeated. They are those who, even when persecuted, continue to generate life, wisdom, and resistance. They are those who, despite all the systems created to destroy them, remain standing. Black people are a prophetic people, a people who carry in their blood the marks of survival, but also the keys to liberation. A people who were set apart, not to be marginalized, but to lead a new era of spiritual restoration. But that's where the war intensifies. Because the spiritual enemy doesn't fight against those without purpose. He only uses resources, strategies, and attacks against those who represent a threat to his dominion. That's why so many Black people face an internal struggle from a young age that seems endless. That's why so many feel trapped, persecuted, and spiritually oppressed, even when they are trying to do everything right. Because there is an invisible war happening, and this war is for spiritual territory. The enemy wants to occupy the places that were destined for the children of the promise. It's not just about racism. It's not just about social injustice. It's about preventing the promise from being fulfilled. It's about preventing an entire people from discovering that they possess the authority to open spiritual paths, to break ancient chains, to rewrite history with their own hands. That's why there is so much resistance. That's why so many face rejection wherever they go, no matter how excellent they are at what they do. Because it's not about merit. It's about lineage. It's about spiritual threat. Your existence disturbs the darkness not because of what you have, but because of what you carry in your spirit. And this explains so much. It explains why the spiritual gifts of many are blocked from an early age. It explains why so many talents are stifled. Why the minds of many live in confusion, in cycles of self-sabotage, fear, doubt, and shame. Because if the enemy manages to keep the minds of the children of the promise captive, he prevents them from discovering the power that lies in their words, in their prayers, in their steps. He knows that if you rise up, you will not only free yourself, you will free others with you. And Black people have always been agents of liberation, even though this has been stifled, denied, erased. From Egypt, where the Hebrews were seen as servants, but God raised them up as a nation. From the African diasporas, where even enslaved, they still taught, resisted, healed, prophesied. The spiritual strength of Black people was not built in luxurious temples, but in hidden sacred spaces, in simple houses, in prayers made with tears. It was forged in the fire of pain, but tempered with faith. This faith that does not die, that does not surrender, that even with chains on their feet continued to say, "I know that there is a God who has not abandoned me." And this God is now calling the children of the promise to awaken, to understand that it's not about seeking acceptance in a system built to oppress, but about taking their place in the spiritual realm, a place of authority, clarity, and mission. And for that, it's necessary to recognize the war is real. But you are not fighting alone. There is an invisible army fighting alongside you. There is a covenant being restored, There is a new time approaching, but it demands that you rise up with understanding. The biggest lie they told black people is that they are merely survivors, when in fact, they are bearers of the promise. And when you understand this, everything begins to change. You pray with more purpose. You walk with more firmness. You face battles with a different posture. Because you know that every resistance, every obstacle, every struggle is linked to something that the spiritual world recognizes. You are dangerous to the system of darkness. You are the answer to the prayers of generations that came before you. You are the fulfillment of a promise made in ancient times. And at this point in the journey, I want to invite you to do something. If this word is echoing within you, comment here. I am a child of the promise. Declare it. Affirm it aloud, if you need to. Or write in your own words how you perceive this invisible war in your life, in your thoughts, in your emotions. Your voice is a spiritual weapon, and by commenting, you are marking your territory. You are taking a stand. You are breaking the silence that darkness tries so hard to maintain. Let's continue together, because there are more layers of this revelation that still need to be exposed. If up until now you have begun to see more clearly that there is a specific, intentional, and silent spiritual war against black people, then it's time to go deeper, because it's not enough to just say there is a purpose. It is necessary to prove that this purpose exists, that this lineage has a basis, has roots, has evidence. And this evidence is in the scriptures. It is in history. It is in the subtext of sacred texts that, for centuries, have been read selectively, as if certain names, places, and peoples were merely figurative elements. But they are not. They are clues. And when you start connecting these clues, you discover that the presence of black people in the biblical narrative is far more central than you've been told. Let's start with the name Cush, one of the first references to African peoples in the Bible. Genesis 10:6 shows that Cush is the son of Ham, grandson of Noah, and the name Cush, in various translations, is directly linked to Ethiopia, an African nation with profound spiritual significance. The word Cush appears more than 30 times throughout the scriptures and always related to a powerful and often respected black lineage. But this presence is rarely discussed, rarely explored, as if it weren't part of the main story. And that's where the erasure begins. In Numbers 12:1, for example, Moses, the liberator of the Hebrew people, marries a Cushite woman, and this union causes outrage in Aaron and Miriam, not because she was a foreigner in the spiritual sense, but because she was Cushite, that is, black, African. And God not only defends Moses, but also punishes Miriam with leprosy for her racist attitude. It's there, black and white, one of the first manifestations of racism in the scriptures, and God responds severely. This already shows us how much the black presence is in the Bible, even when they try to soften or erase it. If we look at Psalm 68:31, we find one of the most prophetic and powerful statements about the African people. Princes will come from Egypt. Ethiopia will soon stretch out her hands to God. There is no ambiguity here. There is a promise, a revelation, a spiritual calling. Ethiopia, a black territory, will stretch out her hands to God. This is not symbolic. This is literal. It is saying that there is a connection between this people and the divine movement. It is affirming that there will be an awakening, a response, a reconnection. But why does almost no one talk about this? Because for centuries, Eurocentric theologies shaped how the Bible was interpreted, preached, and taught. And these theologies omitted, distorted, or simply ignored black characters. But they are there, everywhere. The Queen of Sheba, for example, one of the wisest women in the Bible, from the south, probably from Ethiopia or the territory that today comprises Yemen and parts of East Africa, visits King Solomon and surprises him with her intelligence, wealth, and faith. A black woman who brings profound spiritual questions and is received with honor, something rare in a world where women, and especially black women, were undervalued. But it doesn't stop there. In the New Testament, in Acts 8, we have the Ethiopian eunuch, a high official of Queen Candace. He is reading the prophet Isaiah when the Holy Spirit sends Philip to meet him. This man is baptized and takes the Christian faith to Africa before many apostles even reached other regions. In other words, the first African missionary, a black man, already appears in the first chapters of the church. Have you ever heard this from a pulpit? Well, there you have it. And if we delve into the texts considered apocryphal, those that did not enter the traditional canon of Scripture, we find even more elements. The Book of Enoch, for example, a profoundly spiritual and symbolic text that was widely read by early Christians and remains among the Ethiopian sacred texts to this day, contains intense spiritual visions, speaks of the fall of the angels, the judgment of the wicked, and a lineage that would be preserved. Why was this book rejected by the dominant religious systems? Because it speaks too much, because it reveals too much, because it connects spiritual mysteries too closely to a people the world wanted to keep uninformed. Enoch was Noah's great-grandfather, a man who walked with God and was taken up without passing through death, a prophet who left a written legacy, hidden for centuries. And look, it is precisely in African territory that this book remained guarded, preserved, read, and respected. Does this seem like chance to you? Or is there a divine intention in this? The spiritual roots of the Black people are deeply intertwined with these ancient texts, with these lost revelations, with these paths that are only now being rediscovered by those who dare to go beyond the obvious. The Book of Revelation itself contains symbolic imagery that can be related to this spiritual restoration. John sees multitudes from every tribe, language, and nation. This is not just about cultural diversity. It is about the spiritual restoration of all peoples, including, and especially, those who have been oppressed. The white robes, the palms in their hands, the presence before the throne, all point to a time when those who were rejected on earth will be honored in heaven. When you begin to see this, your faith changes. You stop seeing yourself as someone who entered the story later, as a foreign body in a system that doesn't recognize you. You understand that you were already part of the plan from the beginning, that your spiritual ancestors are not just characters from distant stories, but key pieces on the chessboard of divine purpose, that your color, your origin, your lineage are not barriers. They are seals of a calling. And now that this evidence is starting to come to light, what will you do with this truth? Will you ignore it? Will you continue to see yourself as someone without a past, without spiritual weight, without the right to take a stand? Or will you embrace your identity once and for all? Because the Bible doesn't hide who you are. History hasn't been able to erase it, and heaven still calls you by name, a name that perhaps the world has forgotten, but that the kingdom recognizes. If this passage resonated with you, if you were able to see yourself within these scriptures that have always been yours, but which were never presented to you in this way, comment here, "Now I know I am in the Bible." Or if you want to go deeper, write in your own words how this new perspective is changing the way you see your faith, your spirituality, and your identity. Your comments are seeds of restoration, and every word written here helps others find their spiritual roots as well. Let's continue together because the revelation is not yet complete. If you've made it this far, you've already realized that the evidence is clear. The connections are profound, and the signs are everywhere. The presence of Black people in the scriptures is real, powerful, and undeniable. But even so, why has this never been taught? Why do most Black people grow up believing that their spiritual history begins with the pain of slavery and not with the brilliance of the promise? The answer lies in something many avoid facing. There is an intentional system that works to silence all of this. A system that is not content with merely dominating bodies or exploiting wealth. It wants to control narratives. And when you control the narrative, you control the spiritual power of a people. This system begins with manipulation. It rewrites history, cuts out facts, distorts references. It takes Black, spiritual, and ancestral symbols and transforms them into threats. It converts millennia-old knowledge into wrong beliefs. It calls ancestral wisdom ignorance. It paints African spirituality with the colors of fear, sin, and condemnation. But what it fears most is awakening. Because the spiritual awakening of a Black people, aware of their origin, their strength, their presence in the history of salvation, that destabilizes the entire power structure that was built to keep that same people at the base of the pyramid. For centuries, the system operated with precise strategies. It erased records, burned documents, hid books, banned manuscripts, and imposed new doctrines. What remained was a version of history filtered through Eurocentric lenses, where the main characters have faces that don't resemble ours, where holiness has a specific appearance standard, where God is represented by images that reinforce the superiority of one group over another. All of this was intentional. It wasn't just historical oversight. It was a design. Eurocentric doctrine not only shaped theology, but also defined who could be considered saved, holy, chosen. It excluded Black people from the centrality of faith, always positioning them as those who need to be evangelized, saved, civilized, and corrected. This caused many Black people, upon entering religious spaces, to already feel indebted, as if they needed to fit into something that wasn't made for them. Faith became a place of effort and pain, not of reconnection and identity. And here comes the hardest part. Religion, at many points in history, has been used as a tool of oppression. It was placed in the hands of colonizers as justification for enslavement. It was preached on slave ships, in pillories, on plantations, in invaded quilombos, maroon settlements. It was the God of the whites, justifying the whip, rape, and erasure. And so, thousands of Black people were forced to accept a faith that came from above, that saw them as inferior, cursed, unworthy. This created a deep spiritual trauma that still reverberates today. This is why so many Black people feel uncomfortable in traditional religious environments. Because their bodies, their voices, their ways of expressing faith are not recognized as legitimate. They are tolerated when they fit in, but rejected when they dare to be authentic. The dance, the song, the rhythm, the clamor, all of this has been associated with sin, with lack of control, with excess. But deep down, they were legitimate forms of ancestral spirituality, expressions of a people who have always had an intimate connection with the sacred. Institutionalized religion not only excluded, it programmed. It conditioned Black people to see themselves as servants and not as heirs. It taught that blessing is whiteness, that the sacred has a European accent, that what is right is always what comes from outside. And this spiritual programming weakened generations. Generations that grew up ashamed of their history, afraid of their symbols, repulsed by their own rights. But now it's time to break with that. It's time to reclaim the truth. And this truth is not just historical information. It's a spiritual revelation. When you discover you've been deceived, something inside you revolts. But when you understand, because you were deceived, and you begin to reclaim the power that was taken from you. The system hid the truth from you because it knew that if you knew who you were, you would become unstoppable. If you understood that God has always walked with His people, even in the deserts of pain, even on the ships of slavery, even in the slave quarters of silence, you would never again accept living spiritually chained. Therefore, the rescue of spiritual truth is not merely a process of knowledge. It is a process of liberation, liberating the mind, the spirit, the senses, breaking with imposed codes and returning to divine codes, returning to the Word, not with the eyes of the oppressor, but with the eyes of one who wants to reconnect with their origin, returning to the sacred texts and asking, what have I been told that is not true? What have they hidden from me? What have they taught me that has distanced me from my essence? This rescue is personal, but it's also collective. When a Black person awakens spiritually, they become a portal for others to awaken as well. Their life becomes a message. Their journey becomes a beacon. And that's why the system fears this kind of content, conversation, and reflection so much. Because this isn't just a video. It's a spiritual seed being planted in the fertile soil of consciousness. It's a reunion between past, present, and purpose. But it won't be easy, because this system still operates. It still tries to control voices, block paths, discredit messengers. It still acts through algorithms, platforms, religious structures, and institutions that define what is right or wrong based on criteria that favor only one side of the story. But the truth once revealed cannot be unrevealed. It is unsettling, but it also illuminates. And that's what we're doing here, lighting lights where there was once darkness. And now I want to invite you to be part of this process. If what you've heard here has touched you, made you reflect, or reminded you of an experience where you felt your spirituality was silenced or distorted, comment below, I am reclaiming my spiritual truth. Or if you prefer, write about how this system has affected you, what you've experienced, what you realize today that was previously hidden. Your comments are part of the liberation. Every word you write here is a cry back to your rightful place, and we still have more to reveal. The journey continues. Have you ever stopped to think about how many times you've felt disconnected from who you truly are, as if there were a part of you that has always been hidden, erased, ignored? This feeling isn't just emotional, it's spiritual, it's profound, and it originates from the disconnection that Black people have suffered from their own identity throughout history. Reclaiming this spiritual identity isn't just a symbolic act, it's a vital necessity to restore the strength, faith, and purpose that have been interrupted by centuries of oppression, manipulation, and invisible attacks. What many don't understand is that this disconnection didn't happen by chance. It was systematically cultivated by forces that knew that when Black people were spiritually asleep, it would be easier to control them, erase them, and divert them from their divine mission. But now the time has come to reverse this. Now is the time to rediscover who you are from a spiritual perspective, to recognize that your ancestry is not just history, but a lineage of spiritual power and authority that continues to live within you. The first step toward this restoration is knowledge. Spiritual knowledge isn't just about knowing the scriptures or sacred books. It's understanding that you carry a divine and ancestral heritage that transcends the pain, racism, injustice, and curses that have tried to bring you down. Every text, every passage, every account of ancestors who were strong, wise, and used by God is a key to unlocking your own authority. It's important to realize that your life is not an accident, that your story doesn't begin with suffering or exclusion. It begins long before that, in the foundations planted by your ancestors who were connected to the divine, who possessed spiritual awareness, and who understood, even intuitively, the magnitude of their mission. Recognizing these roots is essential to understanding the depth of what has been stolen, distorted, or hidden. Reconnecting with God is the second step, and this reconnection doesn't happen merely through rituals, mechanical prayers, or sermons that ignore Black identity. It happens when you realize that God has always been by your side, that He walked with His people from Cush, Ethiopia, and Egypt, that He worked through kings, prophets, Black women and men to fulfill spiritual purposes that still resonate today. This reconnection requires you to look at your spirituality with different eyes, to see that faith is not a tool of oppression, but a bridge to freedom, to understanding your worth, and to fulfilling your mission. When you understand that your body, your mind, and your spirit carry sacred codes, you begin to realize that each challenge, each spiritual attack you have faced is not a sign of defeat, but that you have a special calling that is being preserved through struggle. Faith, when properly directed, has the power to heal deep spiritual wounds, wounds that have spanned generations, passed down from parents to children, often unconsciously, and manifest as self-sabotage, fear, and emotional and spiritual blockages. Faith acts as a restorative agent, allowing you to break cycles, undo patterns of suffering, and reclaim the authority that is rightfully yours spiritually. This is not a superficial restoration. It is internal, beginning in the soul and manifesting in practical life, in choices, relationships, attitudes, and how you perceive yourself in the world. Each step taken with faith, each decision made in alignment with spiritual truth, strengthens the stolen lineage, returning to you what should never have been lost. It is also important to understand that this restoration is not merely individual, it is collective. When a member of the Black community reclaims their spiritual identity, they become a catalyst for transformation for the entire community, for the entire lineage. Every word of truth you proclaim, every action that honors your history and your roots, reverberates to those around you. It is a domino effect of liberation, which begins with one but reaches many, because spirituality is interconnected. The strength you gain in your spiritual reconnection helps not only you, but also your children, family members, and even future generations. Every act of faith, every revelation, every conscious step to align with spiritual truth is an act of resistance against those who have tried to erase your people. And when you understand that spiritual knowledge is power, that reconnection with God is liberating, and that faith is the key that unlocks cycles of oppression, you begin to realize that the true identity of Black people is not lost. It never was lost. It was hidden, repressed, discredited, but it always existed. And the restoration of this identity is an active process. It requires attention, study, prayer, reflection, and courage. It is necessary to question what has been taught, to revisit the scriptures with eyes that see the black presence, to identify the historical and spiritual lies that have been imposed, and to replace each one of them with revealed truths, with knowledge that strengthens, with faith that heals. You need to understand that every act of spiritual reconnection is a declaration of freedom. Breaking cycles of oppression is not just about resisting what was done wrong, but about reclaiming what is rightfully yours by divine right. This means looking at history with gratitude and awareness, understanding the mistakes and abuses, but not letting yourself be defined by them. It means understanding that Black spirituality is deep, rich, and full of codes that can unlock talents, gifts, and powers that have long been underestimated or hidden. With each step of knowledge and reconnection, you become spiritually stronger, more aware of your worth, and more able to fulfill the mission God has assigned you. And in this process, it's essential that you actively participate. Comment below, write about how you perceive your own spiritual identity being restored, or share something you discovered about your ancestry that made you feel more connected to the divine plan. If any part of this content awakens something within you, say, "My spiritual identity is being restored." Each comment is not just interaction, it's an act of positioning, a recognition that you are taking ownership of your history, your faith, and your power. It is through this participation that the restoration is strengthened, because by writing, you declare, affirm, and release truths that were hidden and that are now beginning to manifest in your life and in the lives of others who read your words. If you've made it this far and watched the video to the end, that already shows that you are truly committed to discovering the truth about your spiritual identity and your ancestral heritage. So I want to invite you to do a few important things now. First, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any powerful revelations that we will still bring. Then, comment below with something that touched your heart in this video. It could be something like, "I'm ready to awaken my spiritual identity," or share an experience that connected with what we discussed today. Don't forget to like the video, because it helps spread this content to others who also need to hear this message. And lastly, watch the next video that's appearing on the screen, because it will delve even deeper into these revelations and take you to the next level on your spiritual journey. If you'd like, I can create an even more persuasive and magnetic version of this CTA with strong mental triggers to maximize engagement. Do you want me to do that?